Well, guys, the week always flies by, but that was really quick. So here we are back with Dale Drewery. Last week's episode was absolutely fantastic.
That was
Um,
great.
yeah, and you know, we all know now that she went through her own journey with her health. The challenge of heart disease, not that she had to, but taking a stand with her doctors
Yeah.
about the statin thing and
Yeah.
resisting that, and you know, going doing a research, coming back with information. Doctors eventually, okay, then we'll maybe trust her more, and here you are. So, Dale, welcome back. I know the week went
Thank
fast
you.
for you too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
changing climate, the windows were closed.
Exactly. Well, the windows are closed. They're still mowing out there, but that's okay. They'll get it done eventually.
Such a big garden, it takes them a week. Yeah.
I know.
Okay. So, Dale, let's talk a wee bit about the BioDiet book.
Yeah.
You
Pleasure.
know, we did have your husband on a few weeks back there, and he obviously I was very keen to get information out of him that would help the audience, but we didn't really talk about the book so much.
Yes.
And you know, as I said to him, I emailed him. I said, look, when I speak to yourself, we'll hear about the book, and then I'll encourage everyone to go and buy it. I'll buy my own copy.
Oh, that's
and add it to my keto collection. Do you want to say a wee bit about the purpose of the book? Because there's so many books now in keto, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
You want to go and find them. You won't see them in shops in Britain so easily, but the point is, you know, that they are there and you can't find them.
They are, yeah. There is a growing
so
group of people who.
Why the book? What's its sort of maybe its little difference from other books? What, you know?
Yeah.
It tells me a bit about the book and your involvement in it.
Well, it's an interesting story. David has been working on this for a long time. He's been thinking about this for a long time and wanting to write a book. And I think that because he's a scientist, you know, I would be reading bits and pieces of it. And what I was saying was that there were things that I didn't necessarily understand. The book was quite long and quite dense, scientifically quite dense. And I just remember one conversation, and at this point I wasn't going to be writing with him. And I remember saying to him, he said, I don't understand what this is. And he said, well, what don't you understand? And I said, well, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just, and he said, well, it's gluconeogenesis. And I said, okay. And he said, what don't you understand about gluconeogenesis? And I said, everything. And so he's going to hate my telling that story, but it's true.
No.
And so he sort of, I said, listen, let me just help here, because who's the book for? It's for the general public. And when we were writing this, it was, you know, a number of years. David started working on this, was many years back, and so we were writing this was a couple of years ago, and 2 years, and and so there wasn't a lot of material out there, and so really I said, well, if you're writing it for the average audience, just I'm it, because I know we've gone down this ketogenic route, and I sort of understand the benefits for me, and you know, from what I hear from other people about a ketogenic diet. But I think that we're going to have to be pretty clear about what the science really says for the average person. And that's where I felt like I could bring something to the table, in part because I'm not a scientist, but also because I'm a storyteller, as you know, as a journalist. That's what I've always done. And so it was actually a good combination of skills. It wasn't the easiest, and I'm not sure. I don't think we'd necessarily write another book together, because of course when you're at home, and you know, I always for a long time been working from home, and David teaches largely online, and so we were both at home, so you couldn't really get away from one another, and so you would just be working together all the time. And you know, he'd send me things and I'd make changes and send them back, and I'd hear him call from the other room, oh, why did you change that? And I said, well, I didn't understand it. And so I did a bit of research, and that's what I found. And if it's not right, but there was a lot of shouting back and forth. His office is over there and mine's here. So we would shout back and forth across the apartment. And, it worked out pretty well, in terms of the skills that we brought to the table. And I think that one of the things that was important for me, since David led, so by way of coming back to this, it's a long story, but David had sort of, led me through the whole process of embarking on a ketogenic diet. I said, well, let's take what we learned and turn that into something that is focuses on, okay, here are the steps, don't jump in, which is what we did, do it this way instead. And it's going to be an easier and process for you. And in lots of ways, a more interesting one, I think, because you're learning as you go. So you're learning about why you're restricting carbohydrates and what the different kinds of carbohydrates are and why, and what fiber is, and what a high glycemic foods do to your, to your blood sugar levels and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And the more you get into it, did you get more and more passionate about it? Did you start to take real ownership of it?
I did. I had to stop talking to my friends about it because I'm sure I was driving them crazy. Well, I think in the process of doing it, I sort of understood all those things that, we talked about last week that had happened to me, which is I wasn't sore anymore. I'd started to lose that tire around my waist. My brain was clearer. My skin was better. My hair was better. And I would say to people, and, they would say, wow, you look fantastic. And I go, oh, well, I'm on a ketogenic diet. And, this is what I've learned about it. And, at various points, you could just see people's eyes glaze over. I think in lots of ways, because it's hard to make a change. And people don't necessarily want to make a change if they think that there is a drug that they can take that looks after the problem. Yeah. And I think we, again, talked last week about the fact that we accept that weight gain is just part of getting old. And so, yes, it's inevitable. Don't tell me that I have to do something different to change that. Yeah.
And so the book been written, do you think, for everyone, or is it a particular audience you guys were focused on?
Well, I think it's for someone who wants to embark on a ketogenic diet or is curious about what they are and really is curious about how the food we eat, why nutrition is more important than smoking and exercise combined in terms of our overall health. And I also think that, as an aging population, we are experiencing a lot of these problems. And when I talk about aging population, I mean this bulk of baby boomers that are on their way through the system. That we're experiencing more health problems and trying to figure out if there's something that we can do for it. They themselves are trying to figure out whether there's something that they could do for their health that will allow them to get off some of the medications, like statins, for example, but also medications for diabetes. And, they talk about a ketogenic diet as not being a cure for diabetes, because a cure means you don't have to keep doing it. Whereas with a ketogenic diet, you do, but I mean, it effectively cures diabetes for many people, for most people.
So the big question I know that I struggled with, but again, going back to Eric Westman's voice or Tim voice, convinces me to just, well, these guys sound like they're telling the truth, let's do it. It's so hard though it's so counterintuitive to what we've been taught. We've been taught to eat whole grains, we've been taught to eat fruit and veg, we've been taught to,
and we still are taught to eat those things.
Low fat, low fat yogurt and all that stuff. And this is saying, go and eat full fat yogurt. This is saying, go and have a steak, go and have eggs, fish, and so on. But the fatty fish, not
fatty fish. Yeah.
And so it's so counterintuitive. Did you struggle with trusting that in the beginning, or did you just say, well, I know you dived in, but did you go through that dilemma? Can I trust myself here?
No, I didn't
Wow.
actually. It's funny because before the book came out, I had a friend of mine who's, who I always think of as wise counsel. And she's incredibly wise. And
Yeah.
we had her read through and just sort of say, is this stuff making sense to you? And she would argue, well, I'm not much smarter than the average bear. And I go, no, actually you are, you're
Yeah.
tremendously,
Yeah.
smart. And she had said, I can understand and deal with everything else, but she said I can't quite get past this idea that I'm allowed to eat fat,
Yeah.
that suddenly I'm allowed to, we make a coffee like a latte with with coffee cream, and
Yeah.
so you're drinking essentially, about a cup, well, 3/4 of a cup of cream.
Yeah.
And it tasted so good that I thought, okay, this has got to be good for me. But also I just needed, I figured I needed to trust it in order for it to turn this upside down for me and to see whether it was working for me and how I felt. And then as I began to do more and more of the research into the book, I also began to understand, hold on, these studies have always been out here. We're just not choosing to, we just haven't been paying attention to them. And I think, I don't think that I'm the only person. You could certainly, Nina Teichel, you could certainly talk to her about that.
Yeah.
That, there is to some extent a certain kind of, it's the food industry has a tremendous amount of power. And, they ramped up to do low fat stuff. And now they don't want to go back because
No.
it's expensive for them to go back. Starting to change. You see, for example, high-fat yogurts in places, in health food stores and in sort of the higher-end stores, and really, we should be seeing them everywhere, rather than that wall of 0% fat
Yeah.
with tons of sugar in different flavors, be it vanilla or cherry or whatever it is that you're looking to buy, and they're really pretty much all the same
Yeah.
with these apparent health benefits that essentially are non-existent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, people who follow me know that for the best part of 30 years, I was telling people you don't drink coffee ever. And
yes, yeah, right.
lots of reasons for that, particularly with the with the caffeine. And now I'm having, cream and coffee every morning, and they're like, "What?"
Yes, yeah,
No,
yeah. The coffee, yeah, the cream's not the problem. The coffee might be.
I mean,
But
I wanted the cream, but just drinking cream was a bit blah. So what do you put some coffee in it, and you'll be all right.
yeah.
You wonder about that, but no, and thank God it's so wonderful. And even
It's
in our,
funny, you're talking about the coffee stuff, and I have to jump in because you'll go into it's amazing. You'll go into uh, a coffee shop, and the person in front of you will be ordering a no fat, latte,
yeah,
a no fat pumpkin latte with, uh, vanilla and extra whip. And I kind of go, I don't know what's in that extra whip, but I'm pretty sure it's not cream. And now you've just ordered a coffee that is super high in sugar,
yeah,
and is gonna, if the coffee doesn't jangle you, that the sugar will. And really, it's just the opposite way that.
vegetable oils probably for the cream rather than proper cream.
Yes, that's right. Right. I'm not sure that was cream on top, though. Really.
It's healthy. I used to believe that as well, but yeah. So let's talk a wee bit about. I mean, this is now your lifestyle. You've
It
got
is,
a
yeah.
fantastic book out. It helps the beginner, which is really tremendous to understand
Yeah.
why and gluconeogenesis, or whatever that word
That's
was.
right. Yeah, yeah.
I'll
That's
get
it.
to understand that. It will still
Yeah.
go over my head. I don't care.
Yeah. We'll explain it in the book for what it's
Yeah,
worth.
I
Yeah.
just know that. Let's get what I'm doing. Right,
Yeah.
it's okay. So it must be okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a wee bit about your present passions. You've written the book. What have you got stuff on the horizon you're doing, or have you got ambition to you know, if we ever get back to speaking at conferences, will you get on the stage and talk about this stuff, or what are you going to be doing, or what are you now as a journalist into some other things? You know, what are you currently doing or interested
Well,
in?
one of the things that I do, and it's an important part of what we promised in the book, and that is that the website, which is biodiet.org,
Yeah.
has, if you go into the news articles and studies section, there's a bar across the top. You know, there's that's my job, is to keep those articles up to date. So there's you'll find a lot of stuff in there about COVID, and what I've done is put all those things in capitals so that you can see very clearly what COVID.
Excellent.
And it's interesting because it, you know, with COVID, the COVID stuff, it's really made it clear to me that the areas that people need to be concerned about are things like COVID and cardiovascular disease, COVID and diabetes. So all the things that, you know, that we look at in the book, that, as David calls it, the axis of illness, which is essentially, you know, obesity, insulin resistance, and inflammation. That those same things are what apply in, you know, in chronic disease. So so that's been really interesting for me, and also just nutrition, sort of looking at nutrition and aging. And you know, I've sort of spent a fair amount of time trying to determine, okay, so what kind of studies are there out there that tell us, you know, that about how to age well, and how to age, not even to grow old, but to be healthy, sort of not lifespan so much as health span. And that's more important than ever as this group of people get older. You know, these baby boomers get older, is there's not really in lots of places, there's not really a good health system in place to help us. And so we really need to start taking control of our own health span. And, you know, during COVID, I had been working, there's a West End Seniors Network. We live in the West End here in Vancouver. And I, as part of that, I end up getting grocery lists. I call people who are on that list that I've given numbers of people, and I call them and I ask them what groceries they want. And it's very interesting because, you know, often these are people who can't get out. I mean, they weren't really able to get out before, but now they absolutely can't get out. And it breaks my heart in part to see, you know, that there's a whole contingent of people who think that they should be able to do whatever it is that they want to do and aren't really concerned about whether seniors can get out. But it makes me realize the extent to which we are interconnected and how important that is, that we maintain that interconnectivity. And so often we'll just end up talking, and I'll just call them, and if they don't need groceries, we'll just have a longer conversation. But it's also just made me realize that that's where we're all headed. We're all headed down that road, as you know. We're all headed into old age, and so we want to walk that carefully.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've made my 30 years living out of the mind. My brand is called Mind Store.
Yes, yeah.
And you know, my whole thing's been teaching people to be very careful with their thoughts. You know, you don't attract them into your life. You know, you'll manifest thoughts. It's so, we call it programming. You know, whatever you're programming consciously or subconsciously will manifest. And so I'm 65 now. When I got to 60, I remember I was doing one of my courses in Dublin, and I was 59. And there was a guy there who would come from Spain to do my course in Dublin every other year. What everyone was doing. And him and his wife had always been in the audience, lovely people. And he took me aside and said, you know, I'm now in my 60s, Jack, and suddenly I disappeared. I became the invisible man. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you'll find out soon when you get 60, you suddenly don't exist.
Said,
He said,
yes, exactly.
You don't exist.
And
I thought, wow. And so then I started to think about what he'd said. And by the time maybe a couple of years in, I was doing a course in Glasgow, and I said to the audience, you know, I'm thinking of creating something called, and just use my brand, Mind Store Centurions. The idea being we would live to 100, we would program that we'd live absolutely maximum health,
Yes.
physically, mentally, spiritually.
Yeah.
And that the idea would be that we'll plant in our heads that we will, you know, pass peacefully,
Right.
joyously,
Right. Right. Having lived our lives.
and in perfect health.
Yeah.
And so so I put that out there, and so in part of my journey with this for the last, you know, since March, has been to engage where I could with anyone interested in their longevity or their lifespan.
Yes. Yeah.
And you know, you get, you know, Professor Tim Noakes on and stuff. You know, so what are you doing? You know, well, I'm more or less carnivore. And you go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, given that you've put so much research, I mean, this is the fantastic bit connecting to you, and people are going to love it. You're doing that research, and then you're supplying it on your blog, or, you know, you're keeping us up to date, which is fantastic. That's why everybody should buy the book, because, you know, you can.
That's right. Get out there, buy the book.
Pay Dale back immediately by buying the book, but then take advantage of the service. So what are you, I mean, where's your head with longevity? You know, if you were going to live to 100, healthily, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what are you finding? What are you seeing is important?
Well, I think for me, like lots of people, COVID-19 has really caused me to reconsider what's important in my life. And so I've come to the understanding, because I worked in television for many years, you didn't have time for life in television. You would go to wherever it was you needed to be filming. And I worked both as a director, but also as a writer and a showrunner. And so in each of those, you have different kinds of responsibilities. But in all of those cases, you are expected to do what's needed doing whenever it needs doing. And so that doesn't matter whether it's, you know, on a, you know, the number of times I said, I'm sorry, I can't come to your dinner. I can't take that week off. I'm sorry, I know I said I'd be, you know, at your birthday party, but I can't do that. And I think what for me is what's happened, and it started really prior to COVID-19, but it's really cemented it for me, is that in terms of my mental health, I need to be able to say no. And no, I'm sorry, I can't do that, and not be in a position where I'll be penalized for that. In other words, well, you either don't have this job or you won't get your next one. And I need to be comfortable with that and say, you know what, that's okay. Because I defined myself by my work for so long, and worked with a whole bunch of other people in journalism who decided to find themselves in the same way, that really stepping back was something that was tough initially, but I knew that, you know, that was what my brain needed and my heart needed too. I just, you know, I was working, reality television in the end, and I just thought, I don't want to do this. No. It's not this is not what I want to leave behind. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And so, pointing to stuff that you're seeing, you're doing your research and you're reading stuff.
Yeah.
So, what's your current thinking about what we might all want to be doing to maximize the potential to get to 100 and, you know, beyond and die peacefully? What do you think?
Well, I think that one of the ones, and COVID-19 certainly points to this, is the need to be connected to people and the need for interconnectedness. And I don't know whether anybody else experienced this, but certainly when I wasn't able to get out as much, and, you know, we were particularly given, you know, that I had a sort of a health condition, that a heart condition, that I was being very careful. And so we weren't getting together, and still aren't, with people in an inside space in people's homes or apartments or movie theaters, or that's not something that I do. And I started to realize that it became, when there was something that was offered, it became a bit of an inconvenience to me. It was kind of like, well, that means that I have to get up and I have to wash my hair. And then do you know what I mean? Then I have to then I have to put clothes on that aren't just my sweatpants. And then and then I thought, oh, this is the slippery slope. This is where people become very closed in. And it's such a natural thing that happens that you really, I have to fight it. I can't speak for other people, but I certainly have to fight that. And so, that's been a bit of a struggle for me. Depression has been a struggle for me much of my life. Yeah. And so I needed to be able to fight that. Yeah. And so when those two things met, I realized, oh, I can see where this is headed. And I have to kind of turn the car around, Yeah. And so I'm sorry, I completely forgot your question.
Well, it's interesting. Well, let's just take the questions away you went there. Do you find that, given you mentioned depression,
yes,
that ketos helped with depression, for example, just as an aside for a moment?
It did for me. Yeah, it really did for me. It ironed out there was lots of highs and lows. And I think, to some extent I can explain that again as that fire in the log, right? That, the kindling on the fire and it burns quickly. And then you're kind of like, okay, now I need to eat something else and so my blood sugar levels would get low. And it was that combination of things and I never really understood what it was until I started to work on the book and thought, oh, okay, this makes sense. And this idea that, of course, that you can eat fat now. So, I was, like many people, sort of trying to maintain my weight by not eating fat. And so that helped me a lot. That helped it helped stabilize my mood.
So again, back to the notion of what you're finding for longevity, for your own longevity.
Yes. That was your question.
So you know that you've got to have some social interaction. That's going to be very
important. Yeah.
Maintaining friendships and stuff like that.
Well, physical activity, I think for me anyway, is really important, and I think for lots of people. And so, in the process of reducing inflammation,
type of physical exercise, any particular type you're recommending?
Well, I was climbing mountains, and then I stopped doing that. I mean, I was climbing small mountains, but I was doing a lot of, and we live a block from Stanley Park, which is this beautiful, beautiful park in the middle of it's a rainforest essentially in the middle of a city. And so we're able to get out into that. So getting out into nature, getting out and walking around, getting out and sweating is really, I find, really good. In order to, and I love to swim. I've swum all my life. Fantastic. And so the pool, there's a pool here where you can swim outside, and it's heated and it's on the waterfront. And so I feel extremely fortunate to be able to go and use that. And it's one of the places where, interestingly enough, you can avoid COVID because you are outside. Everybody, they have very few people come in. You've got to book the day before to get into the pool the next day. And so they limit the number of people who can come in. And it's not expensive, which is, I think it's, $7 Canadian per person you can only stay for an hour and a half now. They throw you out after that because they got to bring a whole bunch of new people in. They clean everything once they've got everybody out. They clean all the handrails, all that kind of stuff. Really like to swim. It's really good for my heart. And it's just as good, great cardiovascular. And for muscle strength, I really like TRX, which is it's the suspension training. And, you can throw it over a bar and then use that it's a little bit more like dance than it is like exercise, but it feels fantastic. So, and I really want to, maintain muscle mass. So that's been really good for me. And it's fun too. It's just one of those things that you can always get better at, and, you start to get your balance gets better. And so that's been great. And so that's sort of physically what the kinds of things that I do. Sleep for me is really important. It's been very important for me in terms of mood. As David would say, sleep, food, and exercise, those are the three things you need, Dale. And so when I get focused on work, and especially when I was working in television, I would not have access to those things, or I didn't make room, I think. So I'm starting to get a bit pushy about that stuff now. I'm starting to say, you know what, this is my priority, and I have to do this because I have to do it for my for my heart, and I have to do it for my brain. And it's really important. And no, I can't do that for you because I need to do this.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the benefits of getting old. You just start telling people how you feel, or it has been one of the benefits for me. And I try and do it as gently as I can. But I tend to put my foot down a little bit more than I used to and say, no, I'm not going to go and do that. I don't feel comfortable with that.
So yes, eat, sleep, and or food, sleep,
Yeah,
and exercise. So
absolutely.
tell me about the sleep. Were you always a good sleeper, or have you got better since you've been doing this? And or have you got any particular tips that you're using to enhance sleep? You're using blue glasses, watching TV, or your
Mm-hmm.
iPad or something. Is there anything you're doing that you would recommend?
I'm a fantastic sleeper.
Good for you.
The problem for me is I need to wake up. So I find it easier going to bed now if I go to bed earlier. And again, it was a really disrupted schedule, and I would often work late into the night on a script or something like that. I'd be at my computer, and then I'd drag myself to bed, and I'd sleep for 4 or 5 hours, and I'd get back up in the morning and do it all over again. And I realized, of course, I wasn't working anywhere near my maximum. I was probably, in the basement in terms of, bringing any kind of creative ideas to the table. And I'm mixing my metaphors there, but you know what I mean. And so that for me, it's if I can get to bed earlier. I mean, by 11, I read before I go to bed. I usually read. Well, I read nonfiction and fiction. I mix them up. There was a no screen rule in the bedroom from the last 20 years, which is I just know it's not. I don't have a television. We don't have a TV in the bedroom. I've never had one in the bedroom. I just sort of feel like it's kind of one of those places where you just don't want to be. I don't want to see the news, necessarily before I go to bed. I do read it in the morning. I'm online. I'll see it throughout the day. But then there's a point at which I know I need to cut it off because it just, it activates my brain and I need to quieten it down. And then I'll sleep I'll sleep for 8 hours, but I could sleep for 9 and 10. But I also know that if I do that I wake up. I think this started because when I had the heart condition, I would nap during the day. And because I didn't know why I was napping, I just knew I was really tired. Yes. And so I would nap during the day for what started out as half an hour and then would started to move into the 1 hour or 2 hour. And then I could still go to bed and sleep for 8 or 10 hours. And what I didn't know, of course, was my heart was in the process of not failing yet, but certainly getting run down. And so I sort of stuck to that, being able to sleep longer, but I also know that that's not good for my brain, that I need to wake up. And I think that's the benefits for me of ketogenic diet is that I tend to wake up fairly fresh, with a fresh brain. And so that's been great. So I don't mind getting up. It used to be that I sort of felt like a slowly emerging water creature that's trying to make its way to land. And now I wake up much more quickly and much more optimistic. But I've also started, this is just a side, but it's true. It's sort of thinking about at night. And this is especially since since COVID-19 has been in our world, is that thinking about the things that, I feel fortunate about, and that I feel, that I feel very grateful for. And I'm doing that before I go to bed at night and when I wake up in the morning. And that helps me a lot because it just sets me up for the day and reminds me that I am extremely fortunate and, that I've got health and, that I've got friends and I've got great family and all that stuff is more important than I ever knew it to be.
Yeah. I mean, I've got you on here. This is the second week.
Yeah.
We've done this. Do you have expectation or even ambition to enter into this, keto world of presenting or writing another book? Or I know you said you wouldn't with your husband, but wait to do your own say on keto or something. You see yourself?
Yeah, I think more importantly, he wouldn't write one with me. To be honest, Jack, I think it's, you know what, if there's one thing that I feel really passionate about right now, and that is it's kids. We don't have kids. We don't have children, and so, but what I'm watching is, and I am watching a, what is it in Field of Dreams? It's the movie Field of Dreams. It's that quote, "If you build it, they will come."
Yeah.
And I think that really that's what we're doing with the next generation, which is we're setting them up so badly for health, for their long-term health outcomes, because we're continuing to feed them the foods that ate and suffered from, and we need to get a grip and look at childhood obesity and look at everything from kids who are developing diabetes at 14, type 2 diabetes, and kids who are obese and who are having trouble with their hearts, or are having trouble with their teeth as a result of what they're eating, which is making trouble for their hearts. And that we really need to take a look at this, because we're not going to be able to afford this. We're barely able to afford to look after ourselves. If we do build it and they do come, they're going to be sick for a long time, and they're going to be sick early, and the outcomes for that are so poor that I just feel very strongly that we need to put an end to that. There was something that I was reading, it was a study in New Zealand, and there was a time between, it was 2003 and 2007, when the amount of junk food that kids were eating had dropped from 14 to 10%, and 14 to 11%. And since then, it's back up again. It's back up at 14% as of 2010. And so, in that period of 3 years, kids went back to eating what they were eating before. And that's because that's the food we're putting on our tables for them. And, I feel like the food industry has way too much power, and we need to take that back. And I think that's part of why I think ketogenic diets are so interesting, is that you're not eating any processed foods. So you're not really succumbing to what it is they want you to eat. And, you can ignore all those aisles because there's nothing in them that we eat. And so returning to the way that we used to. And I say this from a very privileged position. And that is that I live in a developed world, a developed country, where I have access to food, and I have enough money to pay for the food. And so I feel very, very fortunate about that. And, I don't live in an urban area where there are no grocery stores. And that's the case for many people in so many places in the world, even certainly in parts of Canada, in the UK, and in the United States, that I feel like if there's one thing that I could bring to the table is an understanding of the science behind why it's so important that we address this now in terms of a younger population.
You're absolutely so right. I mean, it's a major issue. When I walk, when I go out and about, watch British kids.
Yes. Yeah.
I go to one of the better supermarkets, unfortunately, like you are. I'm blessed, and the better supermarket. But even there, you see, I only go into the centre aisles for coffee. I used to never go in for. Now I go in for coffee.
That's right.
Still go for some wine, and I go for paper products. Like.
Yes. Yeah. I delve down for the chicharrones, the pork rinds. I confess.
Yes, I'll go and find it.
I go to that section, but I'm only ever looking, and they're always on the bottom and the back. I don't think anybody ever eats them but me. But that is my, that's my if I'm having a beer or a glass of wine or something, low carb beer.
We had Dr. Al Dannenberg going here. He's been on 3 times. He's got the world record so far.
Oh yeah, great.
He's absolutely fantastic. And since he came on the first time, I no longer go into the centre aisles for soap or or shampoo. I no longer brush my teeth with toothpaste. So since I don't do any of that. I don't even go in for those products. And I've been cleaning, my house since about the last 10 years. I've been cleaning just with vinegar. So there's
yeah.
spray.
So you've gone out. You're off the grid entirely then.
Yeah, off the grid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mad guy that comes in and never gets
Yes, that's right. Well, I hope you're using other products to wash your hair and brush your teeth. That's all I can say.
Say that again.
I said, I hope you're using other products to wash your hair and brush your teeth.
Just water, believe it or not, and occasionally, as he suggested, occasionally some coconut oil. It's amazing. And I've had my hair cut with my hair. Once we were allowed to go and get a haircut again, and my hairdresser didn't notice. She wasn't smearing.
Right. Yes, yeah.
My wife doesn't even know.
She does now.
But she's made no comment. That's
right.
That's about 7 weeks. Anyway. So the point, going back to the kids, you see the stuff people put in their baskets, for their food or in their trolley.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's
for children. You're like, oh my God, And
well, also
our health service is based on the fact that we all pay a tax to support it. And it's not to cope at all with this.
No, it's not delivering. It's not delivering
it's not coping just now, but it isn't going to cope with these generations that are coming that have been eating this dreadful food for maybe 20 years now.
Yeah.
I keep saying it. I would be cooking gallons and gallons and gallons of seed oils, sunflower oil, not realizing it was poison.
Yes, I know, me too. Yes,
I thought it was healthy.
Yes, well, and that's how it was sold to us, and I think to some extent they still try and sell it that way. Or they bury it. They just bury it in the list, and I know that sounds like a conspiracy, but I think it is true, and I don't think I think it's you sort of look at the CEOs of the companies, and they're not eating the food they make. That's for sure. And they're probably not feeding it to their kids either because they know what's in it. So
giving big talks at pharmaceuticals companies, big annual events. I've done lots of them, big stage presentations, and you can be sure the bosses there aren't taking any of their products either.
No, they're not taking any of those home. Yeah.
There you go.
And I think with kids, it's interesting because I think with kids, it's just certainly the baby boom generation, of which I'm sort of at the very tail end of that one. But we had the benefit of eating pretty well when we were kids, for the most part. And again, I speak from a very privileged position in the developed world. We ate pretty well. And so as a result, we're still experiencing these health problems. And so if, however, you start eating poorly as a child, then the health outcomes can be devastating. And I think that we really, there will be a tsunami and a health tsunami, I think, amongst the generation that's coming up, of young people. And I think we really have to be prepared for it.
And what is obvious thing to be concerned about is, I keep saying to people, and I'll top and tail both of these, and I'll go and listen to, to the Fat Emperor and see what he's up to, because he's collecting all the research every week from anywhere in the world. Collecting it, and he's explaining it to us all, and he's even interviewing the scientists. And what's clearly happening is, what we've talked about already, the diabetes, the heart conditions, the metabolic syndrome. The people who were going to died already with this. But there's this, it's not so much a second wave, but it's just the rest of it playing out. We're getting more testing, so more cases, not get the same amount of deaths. That's in every country in the world. But what's happening is, our children are now back at school, Scottish children went back last week. The English kids will go back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting.
In Canada, they're not back yet.
It's going to be interesting to see whether those obese kids with the wrong food start having real trouble with COVID. That would be just a tragedy.
One really hopes not. Yeah, I think that they tend to I think that I think that we're dealing with a pandemic, and so it's difficult to know precisely what's going to happen. But I think that what we do know I was reading this very interesting book called The History of Epidemics, I think, Epidemics of Society.
Yeah.
It looks at sort of epidemics throughout, that they've always happened. We've always experienced these. We've always had pandemics or epidemics, and so we can be sure that there are more to come. And so there is still time for us to adjust our behavior, not just for this one, but for the next one too, and the one after that, because it's inevitable, that, and so we want to put ourselves and our children in the best possible, get ourselves into the best possible physical shape. And by that I mean heart health and brain health and and blood health. So I think we have a chance to do that.
Yeah. No, you're right about the alarm bell ringing about children. We need to do something about that, don't we? You're absolutely right about that. Definitely.
Well, and I think kids get used to seeing what their parents do. So, we sort of know that. We always know that for smoking, for example, that if you grow up in a household of parents that smoke. And so if you grow up in a household where everybody is very, very big, then then it's nothing unusual. And if you grow up in a community where everybody is really big, then, you don't necessarily notice that, you may not be in your best health. If you are obese or morbidly obese, but it becomes so common that we don't necessarily know at the time. I think for that generation, that they don't necessarily know at the time. The rest of the world doesn't necessarily eat like this or look like this or feel like this. That there are ways to deal with it.
All right. And so it feels though we're coming to the end of this, which is feels a bit right to
No, it's a pleasure. This just happened. I think I just talked too much, but it went by very quickly.
Well, is there anything that you are doing, or is there anything you would like? How can people stay in touch with you? Because they probably will want to.
Absolutely.
What are you doing? I mean, apart from the blog, is there anything else that's going on with the website?
The stuff that's on the website now is largely the research end of things. You'll also find a lot of the stuff that, as much as we'd love people to buy the book, you'll also find a lot of the stuff that's in the book. For example, you'll find some stuff like glycemic index, a list of glycemic index foods. We've got some ideas about cookbooks, and I've got to go back and find out what the new ones are, because when we did the book, I guess it's just a year, those are the books that we were using at the time that I was cooking with at the time, or David was cooking with. And so, I think for me, I think one of the other area for me that I'm pretty passionate about is women and ketogenic diets, and the way in which that can, as we talked about last, in the previous time we spoke last week, that PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, acne, health, cardiovascular health, sort of heart disease and stroke, and a lot of the things that, and to a great extent, a lot of the studies have been done on men, and middle-aged men, and so we don't really necessarily, we're beginning to get a better understanding of what it is, middle-aged white men, I should say. So we're getting a better understanding of what it is as for women, what it is for people of color, and the ways in which those things, how those change the dynamic of stuff, that they, that there is a difference with women and men. And so we need to be doing those studies and making sure that we understand how it is physiologically that women are developing heart disease and that kind of stuff, and the ways in which diet might help. And I think ketogenic diets are a really good one for that.
Yeah. And I mean, the obvious question, I think, might be, does your intuition tell you, given what you know now and what you've experienced with keto, do you think it would help women facing, coming into menopause and stuff? Would it give them a better
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's certainly worth it helped me enormously, and I think it's certainly worth a try for other people. And it takes a while. I mean, you need to really change the way you stop burning carbohydrates, you start burning fat, and that's what starts that whole process. But also just this idea that we don't need to kind of lie down and say, I'm old now. Guess this is the way life's going to be. That we have a responsibility to ourselves to sort of jump up and say, no, I'm actually I'm gonna fix this. This is not is not the way I want to age. And I want to be. I don't want to experience hot flashes anymore. Is there anything that I could do for them aside from taking a prescription drug? Is there anything that I could do? And even if I decide to take the prescription drug, can I do something that will put me in a better position when I go down that road? And I think low carbohydrate, ketogenic, fasting, whatever it is that or all of the above, whatever it is that you choose to do to help take control of your health is really important.
Asking on behalf of women, perhaps, or parents with their children, do you think also with a women's cycle, would keto help with a women's
menstrual cycle?
With their menstrual cycle, would it help there?
Yes. Well, I think what it does is in the process, and again, I'm not a physician, but I think that what it does is in the process of reducing inflammation, I think that you experience less of those kinds of, for me, it was less of the muscle pains, right? The muscle pains that made it difficult for me to get out of bed. When it comes to things like cramps and stuff, that I don't know. And that's the kind of thing that I'd be interested in finding out is how is it being used? Or how can it be used? And I think that this is an emerging area. I mean, it wasn't long ago that we didn't talk about these things at all, much less talk about them in relationship to diet. No. So,
a man couldn't ask a woman a question about it.
Well, I think there was sort of a general, I don't think men were necessarily all that interested in knowing either. I think that but even with male physicians and female, patients, it was sort of there would be some level of discomfort. But I think that as we start to realize that what we're talking about is science, and science is really interesting. And so let's forget about, let's stop being so polite and start really looking at what it is that we're doing to ourselves and how we can do things for ourselves that are better than what we're doing. And I think for me, because, that idea that, the truth of it being that nutrition is more important than whether you smoke and exercise combined, if we understand that, and we do now, let's approach it from that angle.
On that note,
Would that not be great?
Yes. Listen, it's been absolutely fantastic spending time with you, Dale. Really wonderful.
Ditto. I feel much the same. It's been great, Jack. It's really been a pleasure. And as I said, I think last time, I really appreciate the way that you're just approaching this as a person, and that certainly put me at ease. And I really enjoyed my time talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, listen, have a fantastic day, what's left of it.
Okay, great, you too.
Out to the park or the pool, whatever you're up to. I'll get to bed soon, read a book, and then... So...
well, that's right. It's a completely different time for you. I forgot about that. I figured it was, crazy. That's how situated we are in our own little worlds, right? It's just, it's 11 in the morning for you too, isn't it? No, actually, it's not.
Back of 9 now. But listen, again, thank you. And
you are so welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I direct everybody to make sure they buy that book. And,
thank you for that.
And presumably they can email you and reach out to you if they've got the women, if they want to question you or something like that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And you'll find me at dale@biodiet.org. So anybody who's got questions for me, as I say, I'm not sure that I can answer them, but David certainly would be able to help in on that, step in on that one as well.
Fantastic. Well, give Dale our regards too. We're looking forward to having him on sometime in the future.
Sounds good.
Well, certainly before the year's out, maybe before the autumn comes. So we'll see what happens. But thanks again, Dale.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure, Jack.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.